In a small town, a silent funeral was unexpectedly interrupted. The wolf, the deceased's loyal companion, began howling and tearing at the coffin, leaving everyone terrified. What could be happening? Is there something that no one has noticed? Shadow, the wolf, knew the forest like the back of his paw. Every tree, river, and hiding spot was familiar to him. However, the forest was also a battleground. Illegal hunters constantly invaded his territory, leaving cruel traps that often caught animals off guard. Shadow had his scars, both physical and emotional. He was a survivor, but the fight for survival kept him constantly on edge, with fear and distrust as his constant companions. Shadow's days were filled with danger. Always alert, he sniffed the air for signs of humans. The sound of breaking branches or the smell of smoke was enough to make him tense and ready to flee. Several times, he narrowly escaped the clutches of the hunters. Once, he was caught in a trap that almost crushed his leg. Luckily, he managed to free himself, but the pain and fear of that moment were etched in his memory. He knew that at any moment, his luck could run out. Hunger was another constant challenge. The presence of hunters scared away the prey, and Shadow often found himself forced to hunt in unfamiliar and more dangerous terrain. During the winter, the situation worsened. The snow covered tracks and made the search for food even more difficult. Shadow, thin and with matted fur, wandered tirelessly through the forest, trying to find something to satisfy his hunger. Each day was a battle, and every small victory was an achievement. Despite all the challenges, Shadow maintained an indomitable spirit. His resilience was admirable. Every time he escaped a trap or found food, it was a reminder of his strength and determination. However, the traumas of his difficult life were always present. The slightest sound of human footsteps made him tremble. He knew the forest was his home, but also a field of constant dangers. Shadow was a lone warrior, with scars that told stories of survival and resistance. On a cold winter morning, Jack, a dedicated worker, was walking through the forest in search of firewood. The snow covered the ground, and the cold air turned his breath into small clouds in front of his face. As he walked, he noticed something unusual lying near a fallen tree in the distance. As he got closer, he saw that it was a wolf, apparently unconscious. Jack's heart raced. He knew the dangers an encounter with a wolf could bring, but the animal's condition made him hesitate. Something inside him urged him to help. Jack approached cautiously, keeping his eyes fixed on the wolf. With each step, he watched carefully, ready to retreat if necessary. When he was close enough, he saw that the wolf was breathing but looked weak and injured. There were visible scars on its body, and its thinness indicated it hadn't eaten for some time. Jack felt a mix of compassion and determination. He couldn't just leave the animal there to die. Slowly, he took a piece of dried meat from his backpack and extended his hand, trying to entice the wolf with food. Shadow, the wolf, began to regain his senses. The smell of food was the first thing he noticed, followed by the presence of a human. Instinctively, he growled and tried to get up, but his weakness prevented him. His eyes fixed on Jack, filled with fear and distrust. To Shadow, humans meant pain and danger. Jack, noticing the wolf's fear, stepped back a bit, keeping the meat extended. He spoke softly, trying to calm the animal. "It's okay, buddy. I won't hurt you. I just want to help." Minutes dragged on as Jack continued to offer the meat, maintaining a non-threatening posture. Shadow, hungry and exhausted, finally gave in to the need for survival. Slowly, he crawled closer and began to eat the meat. Jack watched carefully, avoiding sudden movements. Once the wolf finished, Jack extended his hand again, this time with a bottle of water. Shadow, still cautious, accepted the offer. Gradually, a fragile trust began to form between them. Jack knew that gaining the wolf's full trust would be a long journey, but he was willing to try. Gradually, Jack moved closer, allowing Shadow to get used to his presence. He spoke softly while offering more food and water. Each day, Jack returned to the same spot, bringing supplies and care. Shadow, still distrustful, began to understand that this human was different from the hunters he knew. The wolf's initial resistance diminished, and a curious acceptance began to emerge. Jack, noticing the progress, felt a growing sense of hope. He knew he was on the right path to helping the wolf recover and, perhaps, form an unlikely but strong bond. Days turned into weeks, and Jack's patience began to bear fruit. With each visit, Shadow became more receptive to the presence of the man who, calmly and consistently, offered food and water. Jack never forced interaction. Instead, he sat at a respectful distance and allowed Shadow to approach on his own terms. This mutual respect was crucial for building trust between them. On one of these visits, while Jack was sitting, Shadow finally took a courageous step and approached, touching Jack's hand with his snout in a gesture of curiosity and acceptance. Over time, Shadow began to follow Jack back to his camp, feeling increasingly safe in the man's company. The wolf's scars and wounds were slowly healing, thanks to Jack's constant care. One day, while chopping wood, Jack noticed that Shadow was playing with a stick, something he had never done before. Jack stopped his work and joined the wolf, throwing the stick for Shadow to fetch. This simple game of fetch brought unexpected joy to both, further solidifying the bond between them. As trust grew, Jack and Shadow began to explore the forest together. They walked side by side, with Jack softly sharing stories of his life and challenges. Shadow listened attentively, as if understanding every word. There were moments when the wolf displayed protective behaviors, positioning himself between Jack and potential dangers in the forest. This silent but powerful partnership became a daily routine, a ritual of friendship that strengthened the bond between man and animal. Over the months, the bond between Jack and Shadow became unbreakable. They shared moments of serenity by rivers and streams, where Jack fished and Shadow rested, alert to every movement around. The nights were particularly significant, when they sat by a campfire, the soft light reflecting in Shadow's eyes, which now gleamed with new life. Jack often found himself talking about the future, imagining a life where they could continue together, protecting and caring for each other. This shared dream was a testament to the deep bond that had formed, a bond born of patience, respect, and unconditional love. One day, seemingly like any other, Jack was working at a construction site on the outskirts of the forest, performing tasks that required skill and precision. Known for his dedication and competence, he was handling heavy materials on a scaffold when a structural failure caused the platform to collapse. Jack fell from a considerable height, ending up gravely injured and trapped under the debris. The impact was devastating, and he lost consciousness almost immediately. The rescue team arrived quickly, but the subsequent news was confusing and bleak. In the chaos following the accident, there was a misunderstanding. Seeing the severity of Jack's injuries and his lack of response, the rescuers assumed the worst. Amidst the confusion, an official bulletin was issued, declaring that Jack had not survived the accident. The news spread rapidly, reaching his family and friends, causing a wave of sadness and despair. Meanwhile, Shadow, who had been patiently waiting for Jack at their usual meeting spot in the forest, began to sense that something was wrong. Sensitive and deeply connected to his human friend, the wolf noticed Jack's absence and grew restless. As hours turned into days, Shadow's anxiety increased. He howled alone at night, retracing the paths he used to follow with Jack, looking for any sign of his friend. The forest, once a place of companionship and adventure, now became a scene of pain and desolation for the wolf. Days dragged on, and Jack's absence became unbearable for Shadow. He wandered the forest, constantly returning to the spot where they used to meet, waiting in vain for his return. The confusion and suffering were visible in his eyes, now dull and sad. Shadow refused to believe that Jack would not return, and his unwavering loyalty kept him waiting, howling in mourning through the dark, lonely nights. The bond they had shared was so deep that, even in the face of the devastating news of Jack's death, the wolf could not give up hope. The day of Jack's funeral arrived with a somber atmosphere that seemed to reflect the mood of everyone present. The small chapel where the service was held was filled with family, friends, and colleagues, all in deep sorrow. Photos of Jack and memories of happy moments were displayed around the room, creating an atmosphere of reverence and mourning. People spoke in whispers, sharing stories and memories of the man who had touched so many lives. There was a palpable weight in the air, a collective sadness enveloping everyone present. Among the sad and weary faces, Shadow appeared, attracting curious and concerned looks. The wolf, who usually stayed hidden in the shadows of the forest, had followed the familiar scent of Jack to the chapel. His behavior was unusual. He paced back and forth, howling softly as if trying to communicate something that the humans couldn't understand. The glances turned to the wolf, and murmurs of fear and surprise spread among the mourners. Some tried to shoo him away, but Shadow stood firm, his eyes fixed on the coffin. As the funeral service progressed, the tension increased. Shadow began to howl louder, a deep and melancholic sound that sent chills down the spines of the mourners. Then, in an unexpected and desperate move, the wolf lunged towards the coffin. His sharp teeth tore at the wood as he tried to open the coffin with a ferocity no one had seen before. People screamed and backed away. Some tried to pull the wolf away, but Shadow was relentless, driven by an instinct he barely understood himself. The scene was chaotic and terrifying, with the screams of humans and the wolf's howls blending into a cacophony of despair. Panic took over the room. The attendees were torn between fear of the wolf and curiosity about the reason behind his strange behavior. Finally, one of Jack's family members, recalling the deep connection between the man and the animal, asked for calm and suggested they open the coffin to see what was happening. All eyes were fixed on the scene, and the silence was broken only by the sound of the wood moving and Shadow's low howls. When the lid finally came off, a collective gasp of shock filled the room. The coffin was empty. At first, people couldn't believe what they were seeing. Murmurs of confusion and fear filled the air. How was it possible that Jack's body wasn't there? What did this mean? Shadow, still staring at the coffin, seemed to confirm what everyone now saw. He knew his friend wasn't there, and his instinct had led to this surprising revelation. Confusion quickly gave way to action. Jack's brother, Tom, took charge of the situation. "We need to find Jack, and fast," he exclaimed, his voice filled with urgency and determination. The room, once full of mourning and sadness, was now buzzing with renewed energy and purpose. People began organizing, calling authorities, and forming search parties. The search for Jack began immediately, with Shadow leading the way. He sniffed the air, guided by a fierce and infallible instinct. People followed with flashlights and shouts, calling out Jack's name in hopes he might respond. Every sound in the forest was carefully analyzed, every shadow examined. The fear that Jack might be severely injured or in danger fueled everyone's determination. Hours passed like minutes, and the night seemed endless. But no one was willing to give up. During the search, Tom reflected on the last moments he had shared with his brother. He remembered Jack talking about his work, about Shadow, and about the daily dangers he faced. A fierce determination took hold of Tom. He wouldn't leave his brother alone in the forest, not when there was a chance to save him. The search continued, guided by Shadow's howls and the unwavering hope of finding Jack alive. Finally, at dawn, Shadow began to howl differently, louder and more insistent. It was a signal. Following the sound, the group reached a clearing where, with hearts in their throats, they saw a figure lying on the ground, barely visible in the dim morning light. It was Jack, weak but alive. The clearing was bathed in the soft light of dawn, creating an almost magical scene for the reunion about to take place. Jack, lying on the ground, was visibly weak and disoriented, but his eyes gleamed with new life when he recognized Shadow's silhouette approaching. The wolf, driven by a deep and unbreakable instinct, ran towards his friend with a mix of urgency and relief. Shadow's desperate howls transformed into a softer, comforting sound as he neared Jack, licking his face and pressing his body against his, as if assuring him that everything would be all right now. Tom and the others, witnessing the scene, were overwhelmed with emotion. Tears streamed freely down Tom's face as he knelt beside his brother. "Jack, we're here. You're safe," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Jack, still struggling to process everything that had happened, reached out and petted Shadow's head, feeling a deep gratitude for the animal that had never given up on him. "Thank you, my friend," Jack murmured, his eyes filled with tears. The wolf, in response, stayed by his side, as if perfectly understanding the magnitude of the moment. The rescue team acted quickly, providing first aid to Jack and ensuring he was safely transported for full medical care. As Jack was placed on the stretcher, he didn't let go of Tom's hand, nor did he take his eyes off Shadow, who walked alongside the stretcher like a silent and loyal guardian. The bond between man and wolf, forged in the most difficult circumstances, was now stronger than ever. The people around, who initially feared the wolf, now saw Shadow for the hero he was, admiring his loyalty and courage. During the journey back to civilization, Jack reflected on the events that had brought him to that moment. He remembered the first time he met Shadow, the wolf's initial resistance to trusting humans, and how, through patience and love, they had overcome barriers and built an unbreakable bond. Now, after this near-death experience, Jack felt immense gratitude and a renewed appreciation for life. He promised himself he would do everything to ensure Shadow and other animals would never have to suffer again. The journey back marked not only Jack's return to safety but also the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, where man and wolf became inseparable, united by a destiny proven to be stronger than any adversity. The following days were filled with recovery and reflection for Jack. With Shadow by his side, he shared his story with friends, family, and even strangers, emphasizing the importance of the bonds we can form with animals. Shadow and Jack's story spread, touching hearts and inspiring many to respect and value animals more. Their reunion moved everyone who heard the story, highlighting the capacity for love, loyalty, and resilience that exists between humans and their animal companions. Jack and Shadow continued their lives together, more connected than ever, and their story became a symbol of hope and unity, reminding everyone that sometimes the hero who saves our lives can be found in the most unexpected moments.